Hey, we're going to start talking about spiritual bypassing because I think that this is a trap that we can all fall into at some point. And this can be something that happens to you just once and you're over it, or it can become like I said, like a trap, something that you fall into and like a coping mechanism and ultimately leads to a destructive cycle. And I'll get into like why spiritual bypassing to me is so harmful. But let's talk about, okay, well, like what it is, first of all. So often I hear people say that, they don't want to know about the darkness in the world. They don't want to talk about the dark forces. They don't want to look into their shadow. They don't want to go there because, it's sometimes some really hard truths to deal with. I think I've talked about that before. And I get it. It can be depressing. It can feel like a self-perpetuating cycle or self-fulfilling prophecy, where your attention goes, energy flows. And I think a lot of people think that if you're focusing on the darkness or the shadow, that you're breeding more negativity, that that's what you are manifesting in the world. And I think that's true to a degree. So like when we're watching the news, when our social media feed is full of junk and we're just doom scrolling and things like that, then I do believe that that is going to, like, that can get into your psyche and that can change the way that you're thinking. And you can start creating negative outcomes or more darkness or spiritual attacks, like inviting spiritual attacks, inviting demons and entities into your life. I truly believe that that is a thing. However, I do believe that in order to battle in the spiritual war, that you need to know what the enemy is and like what's happening out there. And also, I also think that the best weapon that we have is transmuting our own shadow. And that's why I really think that we can't ignore it. Like, we need to be informed, but also these dark forces and these demons exist within all of us. And because it lives within all of us, it's everyone's responsibility to do the work and to, face it head on and work with these shadows rather than have them control your life and dictate your outcomes. And so that's why I think, first off, that spiritual bypassing can be so harmful, is because it's putting blinders on. It's saying, I don't want to go there. I don't want to see. I don't need to. And let's, talk about what that really looks like. And I love this quote. It's like, are you healed or are you just avoiding your triggers, right? I think that right there kind of sums up spiritual bypassing to me. So are you healed or are you just avoiding your triggers? Something that I tell my clients, something that I tell myself is, you think you're healed, you think you've done the work, go spend a week with your family. Go spend a week with your mother and see how healed you truly are, because no one can trigger us more than our family. If you have siblings, your parents, whoever is closest to you, even, sometimes like your best friends, people that you have these really close relationships with, where you can fully be yourself, where the guard is down, where they know you through all the layers of, identity that you've put upon yourself. And also, they tend to have been there during when these shadows are formed, like when these woundings take place. And so that's why there's such this ease in being re-triggered around these kinds of people, because it's hitting on these same spots, these same areas, these same pieces of your subconscious and your memory and like your trauma memory as when it first happened. And so if you just avoid these people in your life, cut them out, and sometimes, that's necessary to do. Sometimes you do have to set these clear boundaries. But if that's something that you do with anyone that triggers you, anyone that you find annoying, anyone that shows up as a mirror, you're just like, out of my life, don't need that, then maybe you're actually not setting boundaries, but you are hiding from your shadow. You're avoiding the work that really truly needs to be done. And I think, we see this with addiction sometimes too, where people, that, like, let's say you cut out alcohol in your life because you didn't like the person that you were when you were drinking, or there was, like, traumas or behaviors, or there's some kind of pattern, as an example. And then you cut it out, you stop drinking cold turkey. Good for you. Like, that's such an achievement. I don't want to diminish that at all. However, I also believe that you need to get down to the root. Like, why was alcohol a trigger? And when, in this example, when you were drinking, and that changed your personality, how did it change your personality? What is really below that? What is the shadow? Usually there's something deeper. Alcohol is not the problem. It's a symptom. It's usually a symptom of what the trauma or what the issue really is. It's an escape. It's something that you're covering up in your life. That can be an example. And so I would challenge that. If you have a similar situation, that can be any addiction, any trauma, any person, any kind of trigger. Are you healed, or are you just avoiding that trigger in your life and then acting as if everything is cool? And, so that's one form of spiritual bypassing. I think another form is the good vibes only crew, the love and light. And I refuse to accept that there's any darkness in the world and everything is beautiful and we're all of God and the creator, which, yes, is true. But you have to be able to admit that there is darkness in the world, because there is so much. Like, love and light are one side of the spectrum of the human experience. And on the other side of the spectrum, there are very real emotions, very real experiences and things that are happening in the world. And you can't just put on a blind eye and pretend like it's not happening, like, oh, that doesn't exist in my reality. I think that there is a manifestation method where, you can do that in a moment, or imagine, like, visualize what the perfect world, what paradise would look like, what a 3D existence without the darkness would look like. However, to continuously have that outlook, or that view, or that idea that that's how the world is, I think that is harmful and detrimental, because it's not authentic. It's not real life. Humans are messy. This realm is messy and dark and chaotic and destructive, and we all have that in us. And so by, completely refusing to engage or acknowledge that, it's not genuine. It's not, in my opinion, that is not an authentic version of how we should be representing the world right now. That it needs to be addressed and identified and transmuted, right? Like in the shadow work video, all those steps that I talked about, I believe you need to go through that. So why is this a problem? Why are these behaviors, like, what's the big deal? Why am I making a video about this? Well, I think spiritual bypassing can lead to emotional suppression. So in whatever form you are bypassing your spiritual growth or your shadow, this can lead to emotional suppression. And as a herbalist, a holistic herbalist, one of the things that I was taught through my studies is that allopathic medicine, so like, traditional, like the institutionalized medicine, industrialized medicine, when you go to the doctor, it's allopathic and they are treating the symptom. And often what happens is, because they're not addressing the root cause, it can push the disease or the illness deeper into your body and cause an eruption later, or cause other kinds of issues to start popping up, because whatever you're pushing down, whatever you're suppressing, has to come out in some way or another, because the body heals itself, is self-healing. It's going to find a way to remove the illness or the dis-ease that it is experiencing. And I think this is the same with our spiritual illnesses, with our shadow, with our spiritual dis-ease. And, you know, when these emotions, when these shadows are being suppressed, and if they come out in a uncontrolled manner because they've been pushed down and need to be expressed in some way or another, that's a huge yikes for me. Like, that's scary. That can, it's, first of all, it's going to be unpredictable. You are not going to know what is going to trigger you. It's just going to happen one day. And I think like we see this a lot with these spiritual gurus, these love and light gurus who eventually just lose it at some point, or you realize like all these secrets come out about all these dark behaviors or these predatory behaviors that they've been engaging in and harming people in. And that, you know, that's really scary. That's pretty dangerous. So you don't want to be that person, and you don't want to be around that person. And so that's one reason that I think spiritual bypassing is a huge problem. Another reason is that it can lead to like emotional detachment or like dissociation. And okay, I want to clarify something here for a second, because I think that like non-attachment is a good thing. And that is something that we should strive for. You know, don't be attached to the outcome. Don't set expectations, all of that kind of thing. However, emotional detachment or dissociation is not really a form of non-attachment. It's a little bit more, let's say, sinister and sneaky. It's sneaky. It looks similar. Okay, let me give you an example just to really clarify this concept. So let's say you experienced an incredibly violent trauma, as an example. And during this, you know, violent trauma, you went through a lot, and there was like something that happened in your psyche where you kind of detached from it. And let's say, you know, over a course of a few months or something like that, you detached in a way where you no longer associated yourself as having experienced that trauma. Like you might say something like, yes, that happened, but it didn't happen to me. Like that happened to someone else. Where you're referring to yourself, but it's like a different version of you. There's a dissociation there, a detachment. And the reason that's harmful is because you're not really addressing or acknowledging that this violent trauma, that this abuse happened to you. And in fact, you're kind of setting yourself apart from it and spiritual bypassing the work that you need to do in order to, you know, deal with it. And instead you're you know, kind of putting up this wall, this barrier between yourself and the incident, saying that like, oh, you know, that didn't even happen to me, that feels like it happened to someone else. And you might think that, oh, I'm so enlightened, I've done the work, I've really dealt with my shadow to the point where I don't even identify with myself having experienced that trauma. But in fact, that's like that's just not real. It's unrealistic. It's an illusion. It's a fantasy, and it gives you this appearance of enlightenment, like this Instagram level where you're just kind of painting pretty pictures and saying like, yeah, I'm so healed, like that didn't even happen to me, but it's not integrated. I hope that makes sense. I hope that, you know, if you have questions about it, drop it in the comments. I'm trying to explain it as best as I can, because I think that can be a common form of spiritual bypassing as well. And, you know, those are two examples that I have seen in people close to me, and it can be concerning. You know, you really want to help the people around you to deal with their stuff, but you can't do it for them. But I would say, like, these are things to look out for in yourself. Are there instances where you're like, oh, that sounds familiar, that, you know, feels like maybe I am engaging in some of those thought patterns or behaviors? And really, like, look at it honestly and ask yourself, like, is there a different way that I can approach this? Do I need support in looking at this a different way? Is this something I'm equipped to handle? Maybe I need some somatic therapy. It's in my body, and in order to process it, I have to deal with the the trauma that's being stored in the self, in the body first. And then there are many different ways that this can be dealt with, where you don't have to go so deep right away, where you have to, like, literally feel it and talk about it, to a point where you're actually re-traumatizing yourself. So I would encourage you to use caution if it's something that damaging. And I would also say, like, yes, spiritual bypassing is a problem, but I would also say the opposite extreme. Like, don't go to the opposite extreme where all you're seeing is the darkness, and that whole, like, now you're black pilled and the world is completely, what's the word that I'm looking for? Hopeless, right? That, everything is doomed and you're constantly doom scrolling life, so to speak, where all you're focusing on is the negativity and the darkness and all of the terrible things that people are capable of and committing, because there's a lot of that happening right now. And I think that that is the other extreme, the opposite trap that we can get caught into and start feeling like nihilist about it, about life in general, and just like there's no purpose, there's no hope, nothing matters. If all this darkness is going to be happening anyway, then what's the point? What is the point of any of this, right? And that's a trap as well, that I think that you can kind of flip-flop between spiritual bypassing, and then you start to acknowledge some stuff, and then everything seems like it's out of control and the world is burning and on fire and never going to stop. So I think it's really important to find the balance between the beauty and the light and all of the, sorry, there's just a bird that flew up. It's like he's listening to me right now. The beauty and the light and the magic and the joy and everything that there is to be grateful about the world, like the love and the light. I don't think love and light is a bad thing. Good vibes are not a bad thing, but we need to find the balance. There's also the shadow and the darkness and all of these things that do need to be acknowledged in order for us to transmute it. I think that this is a really beautiful point about what's happening in the world right now, why we're seeing all this darkness, why everything that has been hidden is coming to light, and that we're seeing the most heinous things, the most heinous crimes against humanity being perpetrated right now. I think that it's actually a good thing, because it's giving us a chance to acknowledge it and to transmute it. And it's saying, like, we are not going to allow this to hide any longer. And you can't hide in the shadow, because we are shining the light there. And that's what I really think, the work that we need to do during this spiritual revolution. I think that that's what it's all about. And so I wanted to talk about spiritual bypassing, because I do think it is harmful. And I want to know your thoughts as well. Let me know if you agree, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if this is something you've noticed in your own life, maybe if this resonated with you. Please like the video, share it, subscribe, do the things. It's a new channel. And thank you so much for being here with me. And I'll see you in the next one.